Hey there, Fletch from All Things Overlanding here, and today I'm going to be talking about solo overlanding. I go solo a lot, and I often have people come up to me and they say, how do you do that? Like, I can't go without my friends, or I don't feel safe, that kind of thing. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how I do it, what I like about it, the pros and cons of solo overlanding, and then some safety considerations and tips if you want to go solo overlanding yourself. So if you want to learn more about solo overlanding and how to do it safely, stay tuned. All right, guys, so as I mentioned in the intro, today I'm talking about solo overlanding. Again, if someone asked me, I would say that I am a solo overlander. Like, that is kind of my go-to. My wife likes camping. She's fine with it, but she's not that into it that she wants to go drive around on trails all days for a couple days and camp in places. And then my kids are kind of into it, and they'll go camping with me sometime. But if I'm going to go on a real sort of overlanding trip where I'm going some longer distance to travel to a place and then kind of exploring for 3 or 4 days or more, I generally do that solo. So I do have a 2-week trip coming up here in about a week from now, at the time of recording this, where I'm going to Wyoming. Now, I will be in a group, so there will be 4 of us. In a trip like that, even I, as someone who considers himself a solo overlander, don't really feel safe doing that 100% by myself. Could I do it? Sure, I think that I could. You may have to make a couple different decisions, right? So if you come up against an obstacle that normally you would, maybe tackle if you had someone there to recover you, when you're solo, you have to kind of think about things a little bit more carefully. So let's talk about what solo overlanding is, right? Now, not that this is like a difficult thing to understand, but basically it's just going on an overlanding trip by yourself. There are a ton of YouTube creators out there that do videos of themselves just like out in the wild, exploring places like, backcountry discovery routes and things like that. Again, most of my videos, it's just been me going on the trip and doing the trip. So that's kind of what it is for me, is just me by myself. The pros of this approach, in my opinion, though, are that I get some peace and quiet. Like, you've never had more peace and quiet than you have when you're by yourself out in the middle of nowhere at like an epic camp spot. So that's the biggest pro for me, is just sort of peace and quiet and a chance to kind of get away and do things different. I also like to get things accomplished. Like, I don't just go out there to sit around and drink beer. I go out there to read books. I listen to podcasts. I'll listen to books on tape. I'll think about like content that I want to make and videos that I want to make for you guys. I'll shoot videos and stuff. A lot of the times when I go solo by myself, I'm shooting videos of gear reviews or that kind of thing. So there are a lot of pros to going by yourself, including peace and quiet, solitude, that kind of thing, right? If you can deal with that, if you're not such a social butterfly that you have to be with people 24/7, then solo overlanding might be for you. So now, how to do it? It works just like regular overlanding. There's no trick here. The difference is your mindset, right? So when you're going out solo overlanding, I like to be as prepared as possible, which is kind of a creed of overlanders, right? Like, we want to be self-reliant. We want to be able to get ourselves out of any situation. We want to have all the gear that we would need, all the materials and tools and, that kind of thing that we need when we go out there. When solo overlanding, the way to do it, though, is to really think. You really have to use your brain and think a lot about what trails you're going to take. If you come up against an obstacle or something that seems at all sketchy, you may have to take a different line, or you may have to turn around and go back and find a different trail. Now, that may sound kind of, like you're quitting, or like, to a wheeler, that may sound like, oh yeah, you turned around, you big wuss. But here's the thing is, when we're talking, you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're super, super remote, and you maybe don't even see a person for like days, you can't afford to get yourself stuck. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen in like Facebook groups and things like that about overlanding where people are like, hey, can anyone help me? I just hiked 2 miles to the top of a hilltop to send this message on Facebook, but my truck is stuck in 3 feet of water and mud, and I can't get out, and I'm 20 miles from town, and blah, 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 right? And then you've got people literally mobilizing if they get that message and are nearby to go and try and help that person. Those are the kind of consequences that we can face when we're out in the middle of nowhere. Now, if you're at an off-road park, you're going there to test your vehicle. You're going there to overcome obstacles. You're going there to sort of have fun and do it in an environment where you can be recovered if you needed to by like the staff at the park or some of your friends. But when you're doing overlanding, like this Wyoming trip that I have coming up, we are literally going to be, it's one of the most remote backcountry discovery routes that they've ever made. So there are places where, we're always within about a day's drive of some sort of a settlement, but there are places where, you are super remote and you may not see anybody all day long, or you might see a couple people on motorcycles, but that's it. Like, they're not going to have tools. They're not going to have fuel for you. They're not going to have stuff like that. If you get yourself stuck, they're not going to be able to help get you out. So you really have to think about that. There's going to be a lot of situations, I think, where even though there are 4 of us, we're going to have to decide, hey, there's a bunch of snowpack up here. Do we want to try and go through it, or do we want to try a different route? But when you're solo overlanding, again, that totally changes, at least in the case of the Wyoming trip. Like, if I get myself stuck, then I got 3 other rigs to recover me, right? But when you're solo overlanding, again, building your vehicle for that thing and being self-reliant and being prepared, in my opinion, I think, to be super safe includes a winch. So that's one of the things I added a couple of years ago. I've loved it just for everything, for off-roading, for anything like that. But I did have a time where I was by myself once and I got myself stuck, and I hooked my winch up to a tree and I pulled myself out, and I was like, that's exactly why I have a winch, right? So having something like a winch, having stuff like snatch blocks, things for recovery that you can use yourself to kind of help get yourself out of different situations is super important. But again, making the decisions to avoid getting into that situation in the first place is even more important. Now, on top of that stuff too, because you are solo, you do need to kind of overpack and overthink in a lot of cases to make sure that you're going to be safe, right? So where I'm going with this is water and food. There's oftentimes, at least in my experience, there have been issues with something. It's been too cold for my propane stove to really work well, and I can't get stuff heated up. So having options for food, not just bringing exactly 3 meals because you're going for 3 nights on this super remote place. You got to pack some extra, right? You need to have some snacks. You need to have some, non-refrigerated stuff in case, say, your refrigerator shut off and all your food went bad. You may have to have some freeze-dried meals that you could add boiling water to heat up and turn into a meal. But then if your propane burner doesn't work or something, then you need to back up for that. So bringing just, enough supplies. And I'm not saying you need to pack the whole supermarket, right? But I'm just saying having some options. So I always bring stuff like some beef jerky, that kind of snacky type stuff. Oftentimes I'll bring like canned chili because it's basically already cooked and you just need to heat it up. You could do that over a fire, or, there's a number of ways that you could cook it if you had like a propane failure or something like that, for example. But so having backups on food, having extra water and maybe not needing it all and then being able to bring some home, that's fine, right? But if you get out there and you do get yourself stuck and you're out there for a day or 2 days maybe and you can't get out, then you're going to be happy that you brought that extra water. So that's just something to consider as well. And then another tip for solo overlanding is to let people know where you're going. So I did purchase for this Wyoming trip, I bought one of those Zoleo satellite communicator things so that when we're super remote, when we don't have any sort of cell phone reception or anything like that, I can still check in with my wife. I can send her a text message and let her know everything's okay. I can at least communicate with the outside world, and it will drop breadcrumbs. So it will basically say like, yesterday, Jason was here. Today, he's here. Right now, he's there, right? And it will show people where I am. It also has an SOS button. So again, same situation I discussed earlier. If you got yourself stuck and you couldn't get any reception to like post up on a Facebook group to see if anybody nearby could come help you, then you could push that SOS button and have, emergency services come out to aid you and get you out of the situation that you're in. So just think about those things. Make sure that you're over prepared for stuff if you're going to go solo overlanding, and make sure that you're letting people know where you're at so that it's not like a manhunt trying to find you somewhere in a state because they know you went to that state, but that's all they know. Tell them kind of where you're going to be each day, approximately where you should be. That way they know kind of where to look for you if something were to happen. So those were kind of my tips for solo overlanding. Again, if you're new to this and you've been nervous about it, don't let it intimidate you. I'll tell you, it is a lot of fun and super rewarding. So again, I really enjoy those solo trips. I also enjoy going on trips with friends and things like that. Those can be a lot of fun. And again, on these more epic trips, the longer distance trips where you're more likely to run into some sort of situation where you may need some help, it's probably better not to do those solo if you can avoid it. Now, if you want to, I don't want to discourage you at all. I'd love to do like the Wyoming BDR by myself, but again, there are different people coming on my trip with different skill sets. We've got an EMT, we've got an Army guy, we've got a planner and a map person, and then we've got me who has no skills. So, but I will take video of the thing and pictures. So that's what I'm doing. But I mean, again, I couldn't do all those things that they can do by myself. So in an instance like that, I'm trying to be smart about it. I'm not going to try and be too manly and just go out there and do that trip when it may be not safe to do so. So again, I'm going to have fun on this trip with these folks, and it's going to be amazing. But I would encourage you to get out on as many solo trips as possible. But just like anything else, in moderation, right? Start close to home, just like you would test your gear, kind of test your skill set, test your ability to be out there by yourself, see if you like it. You may not, right? You may get out there and you may be like, oh my gosh, this is so relaxing and I really love this. Or you may get out there and you may be like, hey, I miss my wife, I miss my kids, I want to be with my friends, you know, I don't like the quiet, I don't like being out here, and maybe it's boring, right? Maybe it's boring for you. So again, start close to home, test it out, get your feet wet a little bit in solo overlanding and see what you think. I personally really enjoy that sort of self-reliance and the ability to get out and get away and kind of, you know, cook my own meal and sit and read a book and just enjoy nature. So hopefully that was helpful for you. If it was, click that like button. If you're on YouTube, if you're on the podcast, leave a 5-star review. It'd be awesome. I'd appreciate it. In the description down below will be links to all my social channels. I'll put a link to that Zoleo thing that I mentioned too, because I think it's awesome. There are Garmin versions too that I'll link to, but they're a little bit more expensive. But the Zoleo one, especially right now, at the time I'm making this video, it's on sale, so it's like $150. So it's really inexpensive to have that peace of mind, to have something with you where you could communicate with the outside world, even if you're in the middle of nowhere, right? So I will put links to all that in the description down below. There are also links to all my social channels. There are links to Patreon, and that Patreon group is awesome. We've got a Discord where we chat. We do a once-a-month call where we all hop on a Zoom and kind of hang out. And then there's the Newbie Overlander Facebook group. Totally free to join, growing every day, and just tons and tons of experienced folks and new folks. So if you have questions about overlanding, if you want to learn about overlanding, definitely consider joining that group. Check it out on Facebook. But again, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.